You'll often hear the claim that the United States is the freest place on earth and a stronghold of personal and societal freedom. But for such a supposedly free nation, we sure have a lot of people behind bars. While many rights and freedoms have been stripped away over the past few decades, from freedom of the press to freedom of assembly, in this video, we're going to focus specifically on the US prison system. In 2020, it cost more than $447,000 to imprison just one inmate in a New York City jail per year. This is just your run-of-the-mill jail in New York City, not a maximum security prison, where you get sent once you've already been convicted of a crime. But New York City is spending this much on a prisoner that would go to jail for getting pulled over for drunk driving, or get caught with some drugs on them, and you're awaiting trial. You can imagine there are a lot more operating expenses. The money spent on these jails does include the infamous Rikers Island Jail, the biggest jail complex in America. Rikers Island Jail is infamous for how it treats the prisoners and how corrupt it is. Rikers Island was known for housing minors with adults. The government outlawed it in 2017. This was only 5 years ago. This prison was established in 1932. But only recently put minors away from adult prisoners. Just think about that. Just this year, 14 people have died in that prison. Because of this, federal officials have tried to quickly enact some staff changes and better train the guards. They have also been trying to better the prison system in New York, because of a threat of a court takeover. Again, the average prisoner in New York costs $447,000 per year. At that rate, you can live in the world's best 7-star hotel in Dubai, the Burj Al Arab, for 18,625 nights, at $24,000 a night. Or you can buy a 4-bedroom house in Texas for that price. Now let's start with some basic facts about how the US has the most incarcerated people of any nation on earth, both by sheer numbers and per capita. As of June 2020, there are 2,121,000 prisoners currently serving time in the US, and a total of over 10 million in the prison system, which includes those waiting for trial and those on parole. America has a population of 329 million. That is 3% of the population. Instead of putting all that money into prison reform organizations and trying to get people out of prison, America is spending all of that to keep them locked up, not even giving them a second chance. If you look at China or India, which have vastly larger populations, the amount of people in prison in those counties is lower than the USA's per capita. The US incarcerates roughly 655 people per 100,000. No other OECD nation comes close, and China barely cracks 150. All the countries the US likes to cast as authoritarian hellholes, every single one of them incarcerates fewer people, and often in far more humane facilities. The US represents 4% of the total world population, but 22% of the world's prison population. When you talk about prison and prisoners, incarcerated workers typically earn little to no pay at all, with many making just pennies an hour. They earn, on average, between 13 cents and 52 cents per hour nationwide. Of course, wages remain stagnant for years, even decades. Many prisoners are used for free labor. They're basically slaves for the private prisons. In 7 states, incarcerated workers are not paid at all for the vast majority of work assignments. These states are Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Mississippi, South Carolina, and Texas. Yet even these abysmal wages are not theirs to keep. The government takes up to 80% of these wages for room and board, court costs, restitution, and other fees like building and sustaining prisons. They use little of this money for prison reforms or for helping the prisoners when they are released. With no help and nothing to do, these prisoners go back to the life of crime. These wage deductions generally leave incarcerated workers with less than half of their gross pay. Workers are left with even less disposable income, because prison systems charge incarcerated people exorbitant costs for basic necessities, like phone calls to loved ones, hygiene products, and medical care. Almost 70% of surveyed incarcerated workers said they were not able to afford basic necessities with their prison wages. Because incarcerated workers' wages are so low, families already struggling from the loss of income when a family member is incarcerated and must step in to financially support an incarcerated loved one. Families with incarcerated loved ones spend $2.9 billion a year on commissary accounts and phone calls, and more than half of these families are forced to go into debt to afford these costs. At the same time, incarcerated workers produce real value for prison systems and state governments. The system's primary benefits from incarcerated workers are through producing more than $2 billion per year in goods, and more than $9 billion per year in services for the maintenance of prisons. With the government making all this money from the incarcerated workers, it's not hard to see why they want to keep them in jail. Now let's look at another one-world country like Finland, which has 50 people incarcerated per 100,000 people. You can already see the huge difference when looking at the stats. Unlike America, Finland doesn't send hundreds of thousands to keep people in prison. In fact, they try and help the prisoners by trying to help them be part of society once more. Finland's prison system is based on the philosophy of rehabilitation. Rehabilitation means restoring someone to health or normal life through training and therapy after imprisonment, addiction, or illness. In Finland, prisoners are allowed to work and go to school, and even are given the chance to study for a university degree. So in contrast to America, you don't get an education or work opportunities, and are released with nowhere to go if you don't have a family. These prisons are also called open prisons, where there are no gates or locks. Don't think Finland always had low incarceration rates. Their incarceration rates used to be quite high, but the government of Finland researched better ways to handle the prison population. The judicial system re-examined the laws and the prison system. Now they have one of the lowest incarceration rates in the world.